about genre grammar connection. Hope you guys love this video. Happy watching!
Okay all. For the first, I want to explain all of you about the general grammar connection. What's about it? And there are some rules about it. Let's go. I want to explain it for you. For the next is there are genre. Genre describe well already out there in use in school and non-school environments. These genres arise in social interaction to fulfill humans' social purposes. For this reason, all genres are equally valuable, but they are not all equally valuable, especially in schools. So there are some questions. Is can we make some new genre? The answer is no. We cannot play with a genre with a combine one genre and another, but we cannot make some new genre. For this functional grammar, there are some questions that's related with the grammar used in the university. For the first is, what is the social purpose or function and goal? When we learn about the genre or text, we will always answer this question about what is the social purpose or function and goal from the text. For the next is, through what stage does it achieve that goal? It refers to general structure, some text, or maybe genre. For the last, there are what lexicogrammatical and discourse choice are involved in the above. Maybe all of you is similar and very familiar with this question because all of you have learned in senior high school about the language feature. So that's same concept with the lexicogrammatical from the text. Okay, for the first text, I want to explain about the spoof. The social function from this text or genre is about to retell an event with a humorous twist. So in Indonesia, spoof adalah sebuah teks atau genre di mana dia membuat kita mengatakan beberapa kata ataupun kisah tetapi menggunakan sebuah komedi. Okay, for the next is generic structure. For the first is orientation. That means set the scene. It's mean the introduction and the background of the spoof, and for the next is the events. It's the point of from the spoof when they tell what happened. So maybe it's again conflict, climax, and any other. And for the last is twist. This is the point from the punchline. So in Indonesia, the bagian lucunya dari spoof ini berada di twist. Jadi ketika dalam sebuah spoof, ketika sudah ada introduction, background, and maybe the event, so the puncaknya di komedinya adalah di twist ini. And for the last is lexicogrammatical features. So it is text focus in individual participants. And for the next is use of material process. And for the next is use circumstance of time and also place. And for the last is use of past tense. So you can see the example spoof with the title of Penguin in the Park. For the first structure, general structure is the orientation. The orientation for the next is the event one or maybe first event, and for the next is second event. So what I have said before, there are the punchline, there are twists. That is the key of the humors at the spoof. For the first structure, there are orientation, and for the lexicogrammatical, there are underline and the bold, and it is italic. For the ones, there are underline in the some word that mean provide the example of the lexicogrammatical to use circumstance time. And for the a man, that refers to individual participant, and was walking, it is italic word, it refers to material process. So you can see once it's river what's, it refers with circumstance time, and the bold one that refers with the individual participants, and the italic one is refers to material process. So the example from the spoof with the analysis of the generic structure and also lexicogrammatical. So you can pause this video to look the clear example. So for the next is about the recounts. Have you heard this kind of the text before, so I want to explain more clearly. For the first is the social function of the recon text or genre of recons is to retell events for the purpose of informing or entertaining. So we can underline if about the informing and entertaining. So in Indonesia it mean give information atau memberikan informasi, dan juga entertaining in Indonesia means memberikan sebuah hiburan, menghibur beberapa orang atau readers membaca dengan menyediakan konteks. For the next is the generic structure. For the first is the orientation. For the next is the event, and for the last is the reorientation. For the orientation, it provides the setting and introduce the participants. So we can make some introduction about the character in the orientation, and for the events, we can tell what happened about the climax, and also the plot. We can make some story in an event. For the reorientation, is the optional. We can make this reorientation or no in the context. For the last is about lexicogrammatical features. For the first is focus on specific participants. It's some difference with the spoof because the spoof use individual participants, but we in lexicogrammatical features of free context is used on specific participants. And for the next is still same with the previous text is use of material process. And for the next is also same, use circumstance of time and place. And for the next is also still same, we use of past tense. And for the next is focus on temporal sequence. Okay, let's see the example. Earthquake. So the title is the earthquake, the one of example about the recons. For the first generic structure is the orientation, and for the next the event, and first event until third event, and this is text is not included about the reorientation because that's optional. And for the first, the orientation, the rules is same. The bold is specific participants, and for the italic one is material process, and the underlined words one is tells about the lexicogrammatical of circumstance of place. So you can see others example analyzed in the earthquake text by itself with pause this video. For the next is the report text. Report text. For the first, the social function to describe the way things are with a reference to a range of natural, man-made, and social phenomena in our environment. And for the generic structure is simple because just only contain general classification, and also next is description. How about the lexicogrammatical features? For the first is focus on generic participant, use of relational process, and use of simple present tense. And for the last is no temporal sequence. Okay, here we can see the example. Okay, for the example, there are the title is walls. The first generic structure is about general classification. It tells about the introduction about walls. Walls are sea-living mammals and any other. You can read by yourself. And for the next is description. We can see there are behaviors, qualities, and parts because we know focus in the temporal sequence. So behavioral it can be last, and the part it can be the first. And you can see the walls is the specific participants, and R is the relative process. So you can analyze it with the same rules with the previous text. For the next is analytical exposition. Okay, what social function from this text? The social function from analytical exposition is to persuade the reader or listener that something is the case. So, what the general structure? The first is the thesis. The thesis must position and preview, and for the next is the argument, point and elaboration. Argument is not only one, but we can write the argument not only one. We can 1, 2, 3, or maybe at least 4 in an analytical exposition. And for the last is the reiteration. From the lexicogrammatical features, we must focus on generic human and non-human. And for the last, we can rationalize through causal conjunction and also nominalization. For the next, we can Okay, we can see in this slide there are the example of the analytical exposition. So for the first, we can see the thesis, its mass positions. For the first, is the we can read this sentence is about in Australia there are three levels of government: the federal government, state government, and local government. So all of this level of government are necessary. This is so far a number of reasons. And we can see at this text, it's not just only one argument. There are two arguments at this text. And for the next, after argument, we can see the elaboration about the thesis. And for the last, we can see the structure of the conclusion. Whether the lexical grammatical, it's little different with the previous text because we must analyze there are both ones. The bird word one is human and non-human participants. So the three level of government is the human, and we can see about the federal, the big things is non-human participants. So how about the italic one? It is an internal conjunction at this text. And how about the underline? The underline one is the italic one is the relational process, and the underline one is the internal conjunction. So, okay, that's all for me. And for the next genre or maybe text will explain by next presenter.
So, the first one is news items. So, news items is text that to inform readers, listener, or viewers about event of the day which are considered newsworthy or important. So this is one of the example of the news items. It's a text called Town Contaminated. It have three structures. They are newsworthy event. Newsworthy events is recounts the events in summary form. The second one is background events. Background events in here it elaborates what happened, to whom, in what circumstance. The third one is source. So source is comments by participant in witness to and authorities experts on the event. And if you can see there's a yellow highlight, green highlight, and the underline here, it's a part of the lexicogrammatical features that appear in news item text. So the first one is the underline. Here is the circumstance. The example is like at the naval base of Skotovo 22 near Vladivostok, or in here 30 months before the Chernobyl disaster. And the yellow highlight in here is a part of material process. They are uncovered, contaminated, occurred, and etc. The third one is green highlight. In here is verbal process. In here is was to describe. It's part of the verbal process. The next slide is anecdote. So anecdote is to share with others an account of an unusual or amusing accident. So this is one of the example of the text. It's called Snack in the Bed, and these are the generic structure. The first one is abstract. Abstract is the signal, the retelling of an unusual, amusing accidents, like in here. How do you like to find a snack in your bed? So it's basically tells the readers the unusual incidents. The second one, orientation. So it's the set of the seat. The third one, crisis. It provides detail of the unusual incidents. The fifth one, reaction. It's reaction to the crisis. The fifth one is coda. So it's actually optional, but it's the reflection or evolution of the incident. So in anecdote, they also have lexicogrammatical features. So the first one is underline. It refers to the temporal conjunction, like in here is then, you can see there's then here it's one of the example of the temporal conjunction that you can find in this text. The second one, the yellow highlight, is the part of material process. Set to, turn, appeared, spitting, come running, and etc. The third one, green highlight, is a part of intensifier, like white, an example in here. The fourth one, the italic, is a part of exclamation, and the red one, like in here, a nasty one too. And the red one is a rhetorical question, like how do you like to find a snack in your bed? So these lexicogrammatical features that always or often appear in the anecdote text. Next one is narrative. So narrative texts have function to amuse, entertain, and to deal with actual or vicarious experience in different ways. Narrative deal with problematic event which lead to a crisis or turning point of some kind, which in turn find a resolution. So this is one of the example of the text. It's called Snow White. So in here we have the structure like orientation, complication, and resolution. So the orientation here is the introduce. So it's the scene that introduces the participant. The complication part in here is a crisis rise, and the resolution in here is when the crisis is resolved for a better or for worse. So, and also this text also have lexicogrammatical features that often appear in the text. So the first one is the underline. The underline in here is a temporal conjunction and temporal circumstance, like once upon a time, one day, when, then, meanwhile. And the red one is for a specific and individual participant and for relational process, like a little girl named Snow White. She, Snow White, she, they, 7 dwarfs, dog. And the yellow highlight in here is a part of material process, could be behavioral and verbal, like live, talking, we're having, run away, knock, and etc. The last one is, and the green highlight is a mental process, wanted, did not want, hurt, and etc. Well, let me go to the next. So the next text is a procedure text. So procedure is to describing how to do or how to make something. So in this example is one of the example procedure text to how to do some things. In here, how to do the whole games. So there are generic structure also in this text. There are material. In here, there are material and methods. So material is when it's things that you need to play this game, which is the whole games, and the method is the steps that you need to do. And the underline in here is the temporal conjunction, like first, then, next. And the italic one is the generalized human agents, like second player, her opponent, his, the player. And the yellow highlight is a part of the material process. Tries to throw, wins, draw, and etc. Description. So a description is a text to describe a person or thing or. Alright, so the example in here is Natural Bridge National Park. It have two structure. The first one is identification, and the second one is description. So identification is to describe the phenomenon and or to identify it. The description here is to describe part, qualities, characteristics, and etc. So these texts also have lexical, grammatical that appear often in the descriptive text, and I want to give you the analyzations about the lexicogrammatical that appear in this text. So the first one is the underline is for the epithet luscious, and the italic one is for the specific participants. You can see in here like Pacific Highway, Lamington National Park, and the third one is red. Red is for the classifier in nominal groups like scenic, roadway, glow, worms, and the yellow highlight in here is for the attributive process and identifying process like located, over, and is. So that's all for me, and the next one will be presented by my friends. Thank you.
Okay guys, I will continue the explanation. So, we will discuss about hortatory exposition. And the social function is to persuade the reader or listener. And the generic structure, the first is thesis, arguments, and recommendation. Then, what the language feature is. The first, focus on generic human and non-human participant, except for speaker or writer referring to self. And the use of mental process is to state what writer thinks or feels about the issue. And for example, realize, feel, appreciate, and etc. And the use of material process. It is to state what happens. And the example is poaching, drive, travel, spend, should be treat, and etc. And the use of relational process is to state what is should be. And the example is doesn't seem to have been, is, and etc. And the use of simple present tense. So we next to the example of rotatory exposition. It's about KPK conserves natural resources, and there's notes and the example here you can read by yourself. It's read notes mean human and non-human participant, and the Korean block is mean mental process, and etc. You can read by yourself. And we go to the next material. It's about explanation text. And the social function is to explain the processes involved in the information or working of natural or sociocultural phenomena. And the generic structure is a general statement opposition to the reader, and a sequence explanation of why or how something occurs. And what about the language feature is the one is focused on generic non-human participants and use mainly of material and relational processes, use mainly of temporal and causal, circumstance and conjunctions, use of simple present tense, and some use of passive voice to get them right. Then we go to the next example. The text is about how does rain happen, and you can read by yourself. There is a block color here. Green block means action verbs, and the pink block means passive voice. Yellow means simple present tense, and red means technical term. And we go to the next material. It's about discussion text, and the social function is to present at least 2 points of view about an issue. The generic structure, The first is about an issue, and it consists of statement and preview. And the second is argument for and against for or statement of differing points of view, and it consists of point and elaboration. Then the last is about conclusion or recommendation. So the language feature, the first is focus on genetic human and genetic non-human participants and the use of material processes, relational processes, and mental processes. And then the next language feature is the use of comparative, contrastive, and consequential conjunction. And the last is reasoning expressed as verb and nouns abstraction. The next is about the example of discussion text. It's about examination be held or not. And you can read by yourself. There are some blocks there. And we go to the next material. It's the last material about review text. So the social function. The first one is to critique an artwork or event for a public audience. And the language features. The first one is focus on particular participant. The direct expressional opinions through the use of attitudinal lexis, both value-laden vocabulary, and the use of elaborating and extending clause and group complexes. And the last is the use of metaphorical language. So, the generic structure of review text, the first one is orientation, interpretative recount, evaluation, and the last is evaluative summation. And here are the example of review text. It's about a review of Top Gun Maverick film. Then you can read by yourself. There's notes there. It's not a complete text, but it represents what I explain about. So yeah, this is all of the material. Hope you can get the point of text and the material. Thank you for your attention. See you and goodbye.